Welcome back, everyone, to Lore with Ludus Infinium, and today we are going to talk about my canon changes for the Legions as far as this alternate heresy. Essentially, what is the point when I can turn the Loyalists into traitors and keep the traitors loyal? Now, I will go in order, starting with the Loyalists. And we start with the First Legion, the ultimate in Alpha Legion Loyalists, the Dark Angels. Are they loyal? Are they traitor? Who knows, canonically. However, in this heresy, they're definitely traitors. So, the Lion will follow Luther's path of corruption, plus his loathing of Horus makes him turn to his brother Sanguinius to fight the new Loyalists. The Lion, adapting to a love of torture and manipulation that, let's be honest, his legion gets without him canonically, will turn to Tzeentch. And this justification comes from, canonically, the Psykers of the Dark Angels tend to specialize more in interrogation and messing with people's heads. Next, we move on to the 5th Legion, the White Scars. They give more into their barbaric side, causing more collateral damage to civilians and possibly even allies by losing control of their urges. Their urges causing more and more bloodshed, leading to Khorne's path. Now, to be clear on this one, there are stories, canonically, before Jagatai Khan is found, where he literally cuts off people's heads and puts them on his tent. That's what I mean when I'm saying giving in more to their barbaric side. That is what they become. They specialize in decapitations. They are honorable in a sense, but they just start caring about the fight and the shedding of blood. And that is how the White Scars become the new World Eaters. Next we have the Space Wolves. This was actually an easy and a difficult one, because I had an argument for giving them to Khorne, and I had an argument for giving them to Slaanesh, but I believe I had better arguments with the White Scars and Ultramarines respectively, so in the end they would be close to Chaos Undivided, or at least some form of Chaos Undivided that specializes in CQC. And the way into making the Space Wolves traitors is they begin to almost relish their role as the Emperor's executioners, creating a divide between them and their brothers with an almost longing for fights between Astartes, almost seeing it as the ultimate hunt, the ultimate challenge, a desire just to be able to kill one of their own kind. And then you have the Imperial Fists. So how do the Imperial Fists turn traitor? Well, we have some examples in the book Flight of the Eisenstein that Dorn, for all his stoicism, does actually have a relatively short fuse. Now, to get him to turn traitor was a little bit harder than others. So it was more of having to change not really a good portion of his personality, but something specific in his personality, where he gives in more to his temper and prefers being the aggressor in sieges, improving his might over other constructions, giving him a massive sense of arrogance. So, unfortunately, this is one of those cases where it's less picking a specific point. And again, it's more like the Space Wolves, where it's taking something that's already there to its extreme, which is kind of what happened to the traitors to begin with. Yes, the Blood Angels. how the mighties do fall. So how do we get the Blood Angels to fall? One, and how does it have as huge of an impact to cause a second heresy? Well, Sanguinius would take the role of War Master after Horus politely declines, saying he's not ready for it, or he thinks Sanguinius is a better fit, what have you. And also the higher instances of the Red Thirst and what would become the Black Rage, given to asking for a way to save his sons, bringing him to chaos. Not that dissimilar from Magnus. So he sees his sons giving into this, let's call it what it is, uncontrollable bloodlust, and asking for help from any source, and believing he finds a way to control it, gets manipulated by it. I mean, there are other ways that Sanguinius could turn to chaos, but I believe that right there is the best way. And yes, I do know the Black Rage happens after Sanguinius gets killed. However, what if it didn't? What if there were instances of it happening before his death? To what extent would he go to save and protect his sons? Who knows? It's definitely an interesting thought, is it not? Onward to the Iron Hands. Oh boy, this was a hard one for me. First off, Nurgle and the Loyalists turned traitors was a hard find. I believe it was between the Iron Hands and Imperial Fists, if I remember right. But giving into his legion's love of bionics, Varus Manus searches for ways to also extend the life of not just his Astartes, but their Imperial army complements as well, thus giving him that bridge to Nurgle. You know, in the sense of, hey, what can I do to make them stronger? What can I do to make these mortals live longer and fight with us for longer instead of grow old and die? Nurgle goes, I have a deal for you. Although, to be fair, out of all of the, how do I word this? The primary new traitor legions, like the ones that actually fall under a specific Chaos God or are the new Chaos Gods champions, the ones that I think would actually look the coolest are the Nurgle Iron Hands, because it's them. Well, no, hold on, I take it back. It'd be either them or the Coronate White Scars, but I don't think that's much of a look difference. But you have the Nurglite Iron Hands, you have the Tzeentchian Dark Angels, which wouldn't look much different. They wouldn't look much different from what they are fucking canonically, just because that is what they are. And then the Slaaneshi Ultramarines would be interesting, but I don't think they would have that aesthetic the Nurglite Iron Hands would. So those would probably be the top looking ones. The Ultramarines. Smurfette Guilliman. So, now, this also requires a really big canon change that might actually get its own video, because I will essentially be rewriting the 5th book in the Horus Heresy series. Well, I'm not actually going to be rewriting it, but I'm going to be... it essentially requires me to change the lore in that entire book. So instead of sending Fulgrim and the 3rd Legion to Lair, people notice, like, the Lair will be a hard conquest. So instead of sending one of our smaller legions, shut up, Fulgrim, we'll send our largest legion and just ruffle stomp them. And essentially, another main difference is that when Fulgrim finds the Lair Blade, it looks more like, in all the depictions I've seen, more like a saber, almost. Where with Guilliman, it'll look more like a longsword, maybe a gladius, almost. give it that Greek aesthetic, or a what's it called? A copus. A copus would be interesting too. And of course, as he sees this wonderful weapon, he claims it for his own. Then this pushes him to seek perfection, not necessarily in himself and in his legion, but in combat doctrine. So everyone knows about the Codex Astartes, that wonderful work of treachery that Gilliman wrote canonically. Well, what if you take that to its almost pantomime extreme, just outlandishly overdone? I mean, it's already overdone to hell, but let's say it goes 20 steps further. He obsesses over every little detail, and his obsession and desire for that perfection lead him to Slaanesh. And what is really interesting about this is depending on how much his legion follows him, but being around that damn sword, he'll probably corrupt most of them. But if they develop that mentality, because if you look at there are some canonically Ultramarine successors. You have the Nova Marines, who do adhere to the Codex Astartes. You have actually a lot of Ultramarine successors who see the Codex Astartes as like word of law, which is never what it was supposed to be, and Gilliman hasn't fixed that either. Video on that later. Video on my hatred for Gilliman and how he is the true arch traitor. But you also have canonically supposed Ultramarine successors, like the Mortifactors, who take the Codex Astartes and essentially wipe their ass with it. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And this is going to require a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of calculations and a lot of math on my part to kind of, to determine that one. But that is the canon change for how the Ultramarines fall to Slaanesh. Next we have Vulcan and his salamanders. Oh, dear God, this was a hard one. Remember how I said figuring out which one would fall to Nurgle was hard? Yeah. Turning the fluffiest of all the fluffy brothers to traitor was not an easy task, to say the least. But I did kind of find a way in. Seeing his son's fanatical desire for protection of others, Vulcan feeds into this. Now, canonically, he kind of tempered this. He's like, stop doing the suicidal bullshit of protecting other people. You've got to live too. However, I think when Vulcan feeds into this will create a rift similar to the canonical rift that Perturabo creates. Seeing his legion used as essentially cannon fodder causes a rift between Vulcan and some of his brothers, especially the Emperor. Because the Emperor is the one who makes all the decisions. So if he's making all the decisions and his sons are the one being used as essentially target practice for the enemy, he's going to get that he's going to get that almost mentality that Perturabo had of you're using me and my sons as nothing more than just walking meat, and that's kind of jacked up. So Vulcan could also develop that mentality, and I think if he fed into that fanatical desire for protection to the point of near suicidal levels of protection, then yeah, I could see him developing that kind of resentment, realistically. And then, the same way with Perturabo and Horus, this could be smooth-talked by Sanguinius to bring about the La Revolution, so that his sons don't have to die essentially for no reason in his eyes anymore. It's one of those things where I turned Vulcan essentially into Perturabo, But I could see, because of the way Vulcan cares about his sons and others, that if he does see them throwing themselves and dying to protect others, then if he sees that it's being done on purpose, or he feels like it's being done on purpose, then he will have a serious problem with it. So that in a weird way, Vulcan could turn into Perturabo. Oh yes, the Raven Guard. So this was an interesting one, because I was really between the Raven Guard and the Dark Angels as to who would go to Zinj. But I actually came up with something a little bit more interesting for the Raven Guard. Seeing the injustices on Deliverance, Corax, instead of developing this almost protective personality, develops a vengeful personality. A personality based on, essentially, if you hurt me, or my people, or my Astartes, I will hurt you much worse. Also, seeing himself and his legion as used, he develops an extreme hatred for his brothers and father, wanting nothing more than to bring pain to those who had caused him, his legion, and his world pain. Who does this sound dangerously like? With the exception of, it being a very reactive, I guess you could say, and very one-sided type of personality. It essentially makes Corax look a lot like the Night Haunter, with the difference of his is less about getting justice and more about causing as much pain as possible. So, in a way, this makes Corax worse than Night Haunter. And an interesting little thing for me, going through this, noticed, and I've had this opinion for a while now, but I've definitely noticed with especially Vulcan and with Corvus Corax, that all it takes is one little thing. And in the case of Vulcan and the counterpart I made being Perturabo, and Corvus Corax and Night Haunter Conrad Curse, all it takes is one little push, one little slip, and they could have been demonized to the same fate. Which really shows a level of, I think, a greater level of humanity among all the Primarchs, but also shows a strength in the Loyalists and a very specific weakness in the traitors, which I don't really think of it as more of a weakness, mostly because I love chaos, and I will admit there are weaknesses among the traitors. For instance, see Perturabo and his need to always have head pads. But it's more of finding that way in for all 18 living Primarchs is doable, but only 9 succumb to it. You know, to an extent, the Chaos Gods believed of the 9 Loyalists, it was next to impossible to corrupt some of them. And they believed that, it would just be essentially a waste of time. A good example of this, Sanguinius. If I remember right, Rogel Dorn was one they really didn't see wasting their time with, Rabute Gilliman. But had situations been slightly tweaked, or had they just been pushed in the wrong way, the Loyalists could have become the traitors very easily. And I find that very interesting. Doing like I said, just doing the research, looking at how the legions acted before being reunited with their Primarchs and their Primarchs' lives on their home planets. If they just had a slightly different viewpoint, if they just reacted to something, one thing just a little bit differently, again, in the case of Corax, instead of getting this almost protective personality, if he saw it as, you're hurting my people, so I'm going to hurt you a hell of a lot worse. Just stuff like that. And I hate saying this because this is comparing sci-fi to real life, but in real life, seeing people snap like that it happens every day. So, yeah, I get it. You know, these are Primarchs. They are demigods. They're amazing. They can't, you know, they are better than humans. Well, no, not really. If you go through the lore, they're all very, very human. They're just bigger and stronger, but their personalities and their mentality are very, very human. So it's really interesting to look at it that way. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for making it this far. And I just wanted to say a special thank you to my patrons up in this corner who have been supporting my channel for a pretty long time, for most of them. They are the ones who, without them and without the people on my Discord, link in the description, I would never have made it this far with my YouTube channel. So a very special thank you to them. Also, I have 2 videos. I believe the top one is the one that's recommended per viewer on my channel, and then the one in the bottom is the most recent upload. So give those a check. Let me know what you think on them. But the most important thing of all, I know we're all going through hard times. Just try and be there for one another. Try and lift each other up. That's one of the biggest things I try to make on my Discord, where we're all one big, not necessarily community, but family. And when someone just needs someone just to listen to, just be there for them. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope you all have a very wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!